My name is Zara, and I am 34 years old. Last Christmas Eve, my mother unwrapped the handmade ornament my 8-year-old daughter Maya had crafted with such love and care. Mom held it for exactly 3 seconds before dropping it like it burned her fingers. "I don't take presents from bastards," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Maya's face crumpled. In that moment, I realized my entire family had been living a lie, and what I discovered next would destroy everything I thought I knew about blood, loyalty, and the people who raised me. Before we dive into this story that completely shattered my world, I want to know, where are you watching from today? If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, please hit that like button. And make sure to subscribe because this family revenge drama has twists that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about justice. Trust me, you will not want to miss what happens next. The silence in my childhood living room was deafening. Maya ran upstairs crying, and I followed her, my heart breaking with every sob that echoed down the hallway. As I held my daughter, trying to explain why Grandma had been so cruel, something inside me snapped. This was not the first time Mom had made subtle digs about Maya, but calling an innocent child that word crossed every line. After Maya finally fell asleep, I marched back downstairs where my family sat around the Christmas tree like nothing had happened. My father was adjusting ornaments, my mother was sipping wine, and my younger brother Derek was scrolling through his phone. The picture of domestic bliss, except for the emotional carnage they had just created. What the hell was that about? I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. Mom looked up with those cold blue eyes that had intimidated me my entire life. "Oh please, Zara. Stop being so dramatic. The child needs to learn the truth eventually." "What truth? That you are a bitter woman who takes her issues out on children?" Derek finally looked up from his phone. "Zara, maybe you should calm down. You know how Mom gets when she drinks." But Dad, who had been quiet this whole time, set down the ornament he was holding and turned to face me. Something in his expression made my blood run cold. "Your mother is not wrong, sweetheart. Maya is not, well, she is not really family, is she?" The room started spinning. "What are you talking about? She is my daughter. She is your granddaughter." Mom laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Is she though? Because last I checked, you were never married to that man who disappeared the moment things got complicated." "So what? That does not make Maya any less your granddaughter. That does not give you the right to call her names." "Actually," Derek said, and there was something smug in his voice that I had never heard before, "it kind of does. I mean, technically speaking, she is just some random kid you had with a guy who did not want her." I stared at my brother, this person I had shared a childhood with, who had helped me build blanket forts and had defended me against bullies at school. "Derek, how can you say that about Maya? She adores you." "Look, I like the kid fine," he shrugged, "but let us be real here. She is not actually family. She is not a real Smith." "Smith?" I repeated, confused. "What does our last name have to do with anything?" The look that passed between my parents made my stomach drop. Mom set down her wine glass with deliberate precision. "Zara, darling, there are things you do not understand about this family. About bloodlines. About what really matters." "Bloodlines?" I was starting to feel like I was in some twisted movie. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Dad cleared his throat. "Your mother comes from a very old family, Zara. A family with traditions. With standards. When we married, I took her name for a reason. The Smith legacy is important." "This is insane," I said, backing toward the stairs. "You are talking like we are some kind of royal family instead of middle-class people from Ohio." "Upper middle class," Mom corrected sharply. "And yes, there are standards. Standards that your daughter does not meet. Because she was born out of wedlock?" "Because she is not blood," Derek said matter-of-factly. "Because you had her with some random guy instead of finding a proper husband first." I felt like I was drowning in their words, in the casual cruelty of people I had loved my entire life. I cannot believe you are saying this. I cannot believe any of you are saying this. Oh, grow up, Zara, Mom snapped. The world is not all sunshine and participation trophies. Some children matter more than others. Some bloodlines are worth preserving. Yours apparently is not. My bloodline? I am your daughter. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Mom and Dad exchanged another look, and something passed between them that made my knees weak. Are you though? Mom asked softly. The question hung in the air like poison gas. I gripped the banister behind me to keep from falling. What did you just say? Sit down, sweetheart, Dad said gently, and his kindness was somehow worse than Mom's cruelty. Maybe it is time we told you the truth. No. I was backing up the stairs now. No, whatever you are about to say, I do not want to hear it. Your father and I could not have children, Mom continued as if I had not spoken. We tried for years. We were devastated. Stop talking. My voice was barely a whisper. We looked into adoption, but the waiting lists were so long. Then we heard about a young girl who had gotten herself into trouble. A girl who needed help. Stop. We paid for everything. The medical bills, the living expenses. In exchange, we would take the baby and give it a good home. The world tilted sideways. You are lying. We raised you as our own, Dad said. We loved you as our own. But technically, legally, you were never actually adopted. The girl who gave birth to you, she wanted to keep some connection. She would send Christmas cards, birthday cards. Who? The word came out like a croak. Her name was Linda Chen, Mom said. Sweet girl. Very young. Very naive. Chen. The name hit me like a physical blow. All those times growing up when people would comment on how I looked nothing like my parents. How I had dark hair and olive skin while they were fair and blonde. How I was short and curvy while they were tall and angular. That is impossible, I managed. I have your eyes. People always said I have Dad's eyes. Dad looked away. Contact lenses, sweetheart. We thought it would help you fit in better. I sat down hard on the stairs, my legs giving out completely. You made me wear colored contacts my entire childhood to hide who I was? We were protecting you, Mom said, but there was no warmth in her voice. We were helping you belong. Belong to what? A family that apparently never wanted me in the first place? We wanted you, Dad said quietly. I still want you. You are my daughter in every way that matters. But Mom was shaking her head. No, Richard. That is the problem. We enabled this fantasy for too long. Look where it got us. She went and had a child with some stranger, and now we are supposed to pretend that child is our granddaughter. Where does it end? I looked around the living room, at the family photos covering every surface. 34 years of lies staring back at me. 34 years of thinking I belonged somewhere I never actually had a place. Get out, Mom said quietly. What? I said get out. Take your daughter and leave. Come back when you are ready to face reality about what family actually means. I do not remember packing our things. I do not remember driving to the hotel or explaining to Maya why we were not sleeping at Grandma and Grandpa's house on Christmas Eve like we always did. What I remember is sitting on the edge of that hotel bed at 2 in the morning, staring at my hands and trying to make sense of what had just happened. Maya was finally asleep, curled up under the scratchy hotel comforter, still wearing the red velvet dress I had bought for Christmas dinner. Her face was puffy from crying, and every time I looked at her, I felt a fresh wave of rage at what my family had put her through. But underneath the anger was something else. Something cold and calculating that I had never felt before. For the first time in my life, I was not making excuses for their behavior. I was not trying to understand their perspective or find ways to fix things. I was planning. I pulled out my phone and started searching. Linda Chen, Ohio. Linda Chen birth records. Linda Chen adoption. Page after page of results, most of them leading nowhere. But then, on the fourth page of Google results, I found something that made my heart stop. An obituary from 6 months ago. Linda Chen, age 52, passed away peacefully after a long battle with cancer. Survived by her husband David and daughters Amy and Jessica Chen. I had sisters. I read the obituary 17 times, memorizing every detail. Linda had been a nurse at Children's Hospital. She had volunteered at animal shelters. She had loved gardening and cooking for her family. The service had been held at St. Mary's Catholic Church. And according to the funeral home website, she had left behind a detailed family tree that mentioned a daughter given up for adoption in 1989. A daughter named Zara. My birth mother had died 6 months ago, and I never even knew she existed. I sat there in that hotel room, holding my phone with shaking hands, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. For 34 years, I had bent over backwards trying to earn love from people who had never actually wanted me. I had swallowed their criticism, their subtle put-downs, their constant implications that I was somehow not quite good enough. I had let them treat Maya like she was less than because I was afraid of rocking the boat. But they had lied to me about everything. They had made me wear colored contacts to hide my heritage. They had kept me from knowing I had siblings, that I had a birth mother who had apparently thought about me enough to leave me mentioned in her family tree. They had stolen my identity and then had the audacity to act like I should be grateful for it. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not the hot, explosive anger I had felt earlier, but something colder. More dangerous. Strategic. I opened a new browser window and started researching. I looked up property records for the house I had grown up in. I searched for my father's business records, my mother's social media accounts, Derek's employment history. I dug into their finances, their social connections, their vulnerabilities. What I found was fascinating. The house was mortgaged to the hilt, despite them always acting like they owned it outright. Dad's consulting business was barely breaking even, and he owed significant money to several clients for projects he had never completed. Mom's antique shop had not turned a profit in 3 years, but she kept it open anyway, bleeding money every month. Derek was even worse off. He worked as a marketing coordinator at a mid-level firm, but according to his LinkedIn, he had been between opportunities more often than he had been employed. His Instagram was full of expensive cars and designer clothes that he clearly could not afford. They were house poor and keeping up appearances, just like everything else in their lives. But the most interesting thing I found was a series of legal documents from 1989. Adoption papers that had been filed but never finalized. Documents that showed Linda Chen had tried to contact me multiple times over the years, and that each attempt had been blocked by Richard and Margaret Smith. They had not just taken me from my birth mother. They had actively prevented her from having any contact with me, even though the original agreement had stipulated that she would be allowed updates on my well-being. I spent the next hour reading through email chains and legal correspondence that painted a very different picture than the one I had been fed earlier that evening. Linda had not been some irresponsible teenager who had gotten herself into trouble. She had been 19 years old, working 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school, when she had gotten pregnant by her boyfriend who had died in a car accident. She had not wanted to give me up. She had been coerced into it by her own family, who had been struggling financially and could not help her support a baby. The Smiths had promised her that she would be able to stay in touch, that I would know about her when I was old enough to understand. Instead, they had cut her out completely and spent 34 years lying to me about my origins. I looked over at Maya, sleeping peacefully despite everything that had happened. My beautiful, innocent daughter who had been called that horrible name simply for existing. Who had been rejected by people she had loved and trusted simply because she did not fit their narrow definition of family. That was when I made my decision. I was going to destroy them. Not physically, not illegally, but systematically and completely. I was going to take apart their carefully constructed facade piece by piece until everyone could see them for what they really were. I was going to expose every lie, every manipulation, every cruel thing they had ever done. And I was going to use their own weapons against them. Their obsession with appearances, their need for social approval, their desperate attempts to maintain a lifestyle they could not afford. I opened a new document on my phone and started making lists. Their friends, their social circles, their business connections. The people whose opinions they cared about most. The institutions they belonged to, the organizations they supported, the community groups where they had built their reputations. By morning, I had the framework of a plan that would take everything from them just like they had taken everything from me. Maya stirred and opened her eyes, looking around the unfamiliar room in confusion. "Mommy? Where are we?" "We are in a hotel, sweetheart," I said, stroking her hair. "We are going to stay here for a little while." "Are we going back to Grandma's house?" I looked into my daughter's trusting brown eyes, so much like my own, and felt that cold resolve settle deeper into my bones. "No, baby. We are never going back there again. Why was Grandma so mean to me?" I pulled her into my arms and held her tight. "Because some people do not know how to love the way they should. But that is their problem, not ours." "Are you sad, Mommy?" I thought about that question. Was I sad? Or was I something else entirely? "No, sweetheart," I said finally. "I am not sad anymore. I am ready." The first person I called was my best friend Sarah, who answered on the second ring despite it being 7 in the morning on Christmas Day. "Zara? Is everything okay? Why are you calling so early?" "Sarah, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to the whole story before you say anything." "Okay, you are scaring me. What happened?" I told her everything. The confrontation with my family, the discovery about my adoption, the research I had done through the night. Sarah listened without interrupting, and when I finished, the silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Sarah? I am here," she said quietly. "I am just processing." "Zara, I am so sorry. I had no idea." "How could you?" "I had no idea either." "What are you going to do?" "I am going to make them face the consequences of what they have done. But I need help. I need people who believe in me, who will stand with me when this gets ugly." "You know I will do whatever you need," Sarah said immediately. "Just tell me how." Sarah was perfect for this because she was a social media manager with over 50,000 followers across platforms. She understood how information spread, how to craft messages that would resonate, how to build narratives that people would care about. The second call was to my cousin Rebecca, my father's sister's daughter, who had always been the rebel of the extended family. Rebecca had been estranged from most of the Smiths for years after they had disapproved of her marriage to a woman, but she had stayed close to me despite the family drama. "Zara. Merry Christmas. How did dinner with the toxic side of the family go?" "Actually, that is why I am calling." Rebecca's response was even more immediate than Sarah's. "Those bastards. I knew they were hiding something about you. You never looked anything like them, and they always got weird when people pointed it out." "You knew?" "I suspected. Aunt Margaret always acted like you were some kind of charity case instead of her daughter. It never made sense to me. But this is worse than I thought." Rebecca was valuable because she knew all the family secrets, all the social connections, all the ways the Smiths had hurt people over the years. She also had no love lost for them, which meant she would have no qualms about helping me expose the truth. The third call was the hardest one to make. Amy Chen, my half-sister, according to the contact information I had found through Linda's obituary listing. "Hello? Hi, is this Amy Chen?" "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Zara Smith, and I think Linda Chen was my birth mother." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, quietly, "Oh my God. Zara? We have been looking for you for years. That conversation lasted 3 hours. Amy and her sister Jessica had known about me their entire lives. Linda had never stopped talking about the daughter she had been forced to give up, the daughter she had tried repeatedly to contact but had been blocked from reaching. She died thinking you hated her, Amy told me, and the pain in her voice was unmistakable. She thought you had chosen not to respond to her letters. I never got any letters. We know that now. When she got sick, she hired a private investigator to try one more time to reach you. That is how we found out about the Smiths blocking all contact. We were planning to reach out ourselves after we finished processing Mom's estate. Amy and Jessica were both successful professionals with their own social networks and connections. Amy was a lawyer specializing in adoption fraud, and Jessica was a journalist who worked for a major newspaper. They were not just my sisters, they were exactly the allies I needed for what I was planning. But the most important call I made was to Maya's father, Marcus. Marcus and I had dated for 2 years when we were younger, and while our romantic relationship had not worked out, he had remained an incredible father to Maya. He lived across the country now, but he flew in every few months to spend time with her, and he was consistently loving and supportive. Zara? Is everything okay? Is Maya hurt? Maya is fine, but we need to talk. Are you free for a video call? When I told Marcus what had happened, his reaction was swift and furious. They called my daughter what? Are you kidding me right now? I am not kidding, and I am done pretending it is okay. What do you need from me? I need you to document everything. I need you to be prepared to testify about how they have treated Maya over the years. I need you to help me show people who these people really are. Marcus had always been frustrated with how my family treated Maya, but I had asked him to keep the peace for the sake of maintaining relationships. Now that the gloves were off, he was ready to share his perspective on years of subtle racism and deliberate exclusion. I have been keeping track, he told me. All the times they forgot her birthday, all the times they made comments about her hair or her skin tone, all the times they excluded her from family photos. I have dates, I have witnesses. I was waiting for you to be ready to address it. I am ready now. With my team assembled, I spent the next week creating a comprehensive plan. Sarah would handle the social media campaign, crafting posts that would expose the hypocrisy and cruelty while staying just on the right side of actionable. Rebecca would reach out to extended family members and family friends, sharing the real story of what had happened and providing context for years of problematic behavior. Amy and Jessica would handle the legal and professional angles, documenting the fraud and manipulation while building a case for the harm that had been done. Marcus would provide testimony about the impact on Maya and serve as a character witness for my fitness as a mother. But the masterpiece of my plan was the Christmas video. I had been recording family events for years, partly out of nostalgia and partly because Maya loved watching videos of herself. What I realized as I went through my phone was that I had hours of footage showing exactly how my family treated Maya compared to how they treated other children. Derek's kids, for instance, were always front and center in family photos. They got the best presents, the most attention, the most praise. Maya was consistently pushed to the side, given smaller gifts, ignored in favor of the real grandchildren. But the most damning video was from the previous Christmas, when Maya had been 7. She had worked for weeks on a handmade book about our family, with pictures and stories about each person. When she presented it to my mother, Mom had flipped through it quickly and then set it aside without comment. When Derek's 6-year-old had given her a store-bought ornament, Mom had gushed about it for 20 minutes and hung it in the place of honor on the tree. The contrast was subtle but unmistakable, and I had it all on video. I spent hours editing together a compilation that told the story without words. Maya's excited face presenting her gifts, followed by lukewarm reactions. Maya being left out of group photos. Maya trying to join conversations and being ignored. Maya asking questions and being dismissed. Interspersed with footage of Derek's children being celebrated for the exact same behaviors. The video was devastating because it was not dramatic or obvious. It was death by 1,000 small cuts, a pattern of exclusion and dismissal that painted a clear picture of how a child was being treated by people who claimed to love her. I uploaded it to a private YouTube account and sent the link to my team. The response was immediate and unanimous. This was going to destroy them. Zara, Sarah texted me, "This is heartbreaking and infuriating. When people see this, they are going to lose their minds." Good, I texted back. That is exactly what I want. The plan was simple. On New Year's Day, exactly 1 week after they had thrown us out, I was going to release everything at once. The video, the documentation of the adoption fraud, the evidence of their financial problems, the testimony from people they had hurt over the years. I was going to show the world who Richard and Margaret Smith really were, and I was going to let their community decide what to do with that information. But first, I had one more move to make. One final gathering of evidence that would ensure they could never recover from what was coming. I was going to their New Year's Eve party. Should I continue with parts 5 to 7? I'm building the tension toward the climactic confrontation and the satisfying justice/karma conclusion you requested. Their New Year's Eve party was exactly what I expected. The same crowd of pretentious friends and family members who had always made me feel like an outsider, all gathered in the house I had grown up in, drinking expensive wine and congratulating themselves on their refined taste and superior breeding. I arrived fashionably late, wearing a dress that cost more than I could afford but sent exactly the message I wanted. Maya was spending the night with Marcus, who had flown in specifically to support us through this. I needed her far away from what was about to happen. Zara. Mom's voice was artificially bright as she opened the door. What a surprise. I thought you were still sulking about our little misunderstanding. Not sulking, I said, stepping past her into the foyer. Reflecting. The party was in full swing. Derek was holding court by the fireplace, telling some story that had everyone laughing. Dad was mixing drinks in the kitchen, playing the gracious host. Extended family members, family friends, business associates, and neighbors filled every room, all of them blissfully unaware of what I had learned over the past week. I made my rounds, greeting people I had known my entire life, accepting their hugs and well wishes for the new year. But with each conversation, I was planting seeds. You know, it has been such an interesting week, I told Mrs. Henderson, our next-door neighbor who had always prided herself on knowing everyone's business. I have been doing some research into family history, and you would not believe what I discovered. Oh, how exciting! Family trees are fascinating. What did you find? Well, it turns out I was adopted. Can you believe that? 34 years, and my parents never told me. Mrs. Henderson's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, shock, and then that particular look of someone who suddenly understood things that had never made sense before. Adopted? But you. I mean, they always said. I know. It has been quite a revelation. I am actually planning to share the whole story later tonight. I think people should know the truth about our family. I had similar conversations with a dozen people throughout the evening. I did not say anything dramatic or accusatory. I simply mentioned, casually, that I had recently learned some surprising things about my family history and that I would be sharing the full story soon. By 10 o'clock, I could feel the energy in the room shifting. People were whispering among themselves, stealing glances at me and my parents, clearly sensing that something big was brewing. At 10:30, I asked Dad if I could borrow his laptop to show everyone some family photos. He agreed, probably thinking I was planning some sentimental slideshow for the New Year countdown. Instead, I connected my phone to their large-screen television and opened my carefully prepared presentation. Everyone, if I could have your attention for a moment, I said, and the room gradually quieted. I wanted to share something special with all of you tonight. A story about family, and truth, and what it really means to belong. I started with the video compilation of Maya being excluded and dismissed. The room was dead silent as people watched years of subtle cruelty play out in high definition. I could see faces in the crowd changing, recognition dawning as they realized what they were witnessing. "That little girl you just watched being treated like she does not matter," I said when the video ended. "That is my daughter. Your granddaughter, Margaret. Your niece, Derek. A child you have spent 8 years systematically excluding from this family." Mom started to object, but I held up my hand. "But that is not even the most interesting part of the story," I continued. "The most interesting part is what I learned about myself this week." I clicked to the next slide, which showed Linda Chen's obituary alongside my own birth certificate. "My name is Zara Chen, not Zara Smith. I was never legally adopted by Richard and Margaret. I was essentially purchased from a 19-year-old nursing student who had been told she would be allowed to maintain contact with me as I grew up." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. I clicked through slides showing the blocked correspondence, the legal documents, the evidence of the fraud that had been perpetrated. For 34 years, I have been living a lie. Made to wear colored contacts to hide my Asian heritage. Cut off from my birth mother, who died 6 months ago, still hoping to reconnect with me. Raised by people who took me in not out of love, but as some kind of social experiment. Derek finally found his voice. "Zara, you are being ridiculous. This is not the time or place for this." "Actually," I said, clicking to a new slide, "this is exactly the time and place. Because all of you need to know who you have been supporting all these years." The next series of slides detailed their financial problems, their lies about their lifestyle, their history of treating people poorly and then playing the victim when called out. The people you admire so much, whose parties you attend and whose opinions you value, are frauds. They are barely keeping their heads above water financially, but they spend money they do not have to maintain appearances. They cut off family members who do not meet their standards, and they emotionally abuse children who have the audacity to exist without their approval. I looked around the room at the faces staring back at me. Some looked shocked, some looked angry, and some looked like they were finally understanding things that had been bothering them for years. "But here is what I want you to know about real family," I said, clicking to my final slide, which showed pictures of Maya with Marcus, with Sarah and her kids, with Rebecca and her wife, and with Amy and Jessica, my newly discovered sisters. Real family does not care about bloodlines or legal documents or social status. Real family shows up for each other. Real family protects children instead of traumatizing them. Real family tells the truth, even when it is hard. The room was completely silent now. Mom and Dad looked like they were in shock, and Derek was staring at me like he did not recognize me. "So as we head into this new year," I said, "I want to make something very clear. I am done pretending that biology or legal paperwork makes people family. I am done enabling cruelty for the sake of keeping the peace. And I am done protecting the reputations of people who have spent decades damaging everyone around them." I disconnected my phone from the television and headed for the door. "Zara, wait," Dad called after me. "We can talk about this. We can work this out." I turned back to face the room full of people who had just learned the truth about the family they thought they knew. "There is nothing to work out, Richard. You made your choices 34 years ago when you decided to steal a child and lie about it. You made your choices last week when you called my daughter that name and threw us out of your house. Now you get to live with the consequences." As I walked out of that house for the last time, I could hear the explosion of conversation starting behind me. By morning, everyone in their social circle would know the truth. By the end of the week, their carefully constructed facade would be in ruins. The best part was that I had not said a single thing that was not true. I had simply stopped protecting them from the natural consequences of their own actions. The fallout was swift and devastating, exactly as I had planned. By January 2nd, 3 different people had called to tell me that Mom and Dad's New Year's Day brunch had been a disaster. Half their usual guests had canceled at the last minute, and the ones who did show up spent the entire time asking uncomfortable questions about the adoption and Maya's treatment. Mrs. Henderson, who had apparently appointed herself the neighborhood information coordinator, had called everyone she knew to share what she had learned. The story spread through their social circle like wildfire, growing more damaging with each retelling. Sarah's social media campaign was equally effective. She had created a series of posts about adoption fraud and family trauma that went viral, reaching thousands of people without ever mentioning my family by name. But anyone who knew them could connect the dots, and the comment sections filled with people sharing their own stories of being mistreated by the Smiths over the years. "You should see some of these responses," Sarah told me over coffee. "Apparently your family has been awful to people for decades. There are stories about them being racist to service workers, refusing to pay contractors, spreading gossip to destroy people's reputations. It's like you opened the floodgates and everyone finally felt safe to speak up." Rebecca's efforts with the extended family were even more brutal. It turned out that several family members had suspected something was wrong with my adoption story but had never felt comfortable asking questions. Now that the truth was out, they were sharing their own experiences of being manipulated and mistreated by Mom and Dad. "Aunt Margaret tried to call me yesterday," Rebecca told me. "She wanted me to help her manage the narrative and convince people that you were just having some kind of breakdown. I told her that ship had sailed about 20 years ago when she disowned me for marrying Lisa." But the most satisfying response came from Amy and Jessica, who had used their professional connections to ensure the story reached the right ears. Amy's law firm was now investigating whether there were grounds for criminal charges related to the adoption fraud, and Jessica's newspaper was considering running a story about systemic problems in private adoptions. The private investigator Mom hired found evidence that Richard and Margaret Smith have done this before, Amy told me during one of our daily phone calls. "There are at least 2 other families who paid them money for adoptions that never went through properly. Your case might be part of a much bigger pattern." The financial pressure was mounting too. Dad's consulting business lost 3 major clients in the first week of January, all of whom cited concerns about his character and reliability. Mom's antique shop saw a significant drop in foot traffic as word spread through their social circle about what had happened. Derek was arguably hit the hardest. His employer, a family-friendly marketing firm that prided itself on wholesome values, launched an internal investigation after several clients expressed concerns about having him represent their brands. The video of him calling Maya names had been shared widely enough that it was starting to impact his professional reputation. But what really broke them was the community response. The Smiths had built their entire identity around being pillars of their community. They were on the boards of 3 different charities, members of the country club, regular attendees at the most exclusive social events. Their sense of self-worth was completely tied to their social standing and the respect of their peers. Within 2 weeks, they had been quietly asked to step down from all 3 charity boards. The country club received numerous complaints about their membership. Invitations to social events suddenly stopped coming. The final blow came when their church pastor paid them a visit to discuss the concerns that had been raised about their treatment of Maya and their handling of my adoption. Pastor Williams told them that the congregation was deeply troubled by what they had learned, Rebecca reported gleefully. He suggested they might want to take some time for reflection and personal growth before resuming their leadership roles in the church community. It was everything I had hoped for and more. They were experiencing exactly what I had felt my entire life, the crushing weight of rejection from people whose approval they desperately needed. But the sweetest revenge was watching them try to fight back and fail spectacularly. Mom attempted to launch a counter-narrative, telling anyone who would listen that I was mentally unstable and seeking attention. This backfired immediately when people pointed out that even if that were true, it did not explain the documented evidence of Maya's mistreatment or the adoption fraud. Dad tried to reach out to me directly, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to angry to desperately pleading. He wanted to meet for coffee, to explain their side of the story, to find a way to make this right. I saved every voicemail as evidence but never responded. Derek made the biggest mistake of all by trying to defend himself on social media. He posted a long rant about how families have disagreements and how people should not judge situations they do not understand. The post attracted hundreds of comments from people sharing their own experiences with his family's cruelty, and several local news outlets picked up the story. He basically confessed to everything while trying to minimize it, Sarah laughed as we scrolled through the comments. I could not have asked for a better outcome if I had written his post myself. The most telling response came from their longtime neighbors and friends, many of whom started sharing stories about things they had witnessed over the years but had never felt comfortable addressing. Maya's treatment, it turned out, had been noticed by far more people than I had realized. We always thought something was off about how they treated that little girl, one neighbor commented on Derek's post. She was always so sweet and well-behaved, but they acted like she was some kind of burden. Now we know why. By the end of January, the Smiths had become social pariahs in their own community. The same people who had attended their parties and sought their approval were now actively avoiding them. Their reputation was in ruins, their finances were crumbling, and their carefully constructed world was falling apart. I felt no satisfaction in their pain, but I felt tremendous relief in my freedom. For the first time in my life, I was not walking on eggshells around them. I was not making excuses for their behavior or trying to earn their approval. I was simply living my life with my daughter, surrounded by people who actually loved and supported us. Maya, who had initially been confused and hurt by the sudden change in our family structure, was flourishing. She was spending time with Marcus, getting to know her aunts Amy and Jessica through video calls, and building stronger relationships with Sarah's kids and Rebecca's family. "Mommy," she said one night as I tucked her into bed, "I like our new family better." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Everyone is nice to me now. Nobody makes me feel bad about myself." That was when I knew I had made the right choice. Whatever pain this had caused, whatever bridges I had burned, it had been worth it to give my daughter a chance to grow up feeling loved and valued. The Smiths had taught me an important lesson: blood does not make family. Love does. Respect does. Showing up for each other does. And by that definition, Maya and I had never been more surrounded by family than we were right now. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment watching Maya play with her cousins on a video call when the phone rang. It was Amy, calling with news I had been waiting for. "The district attorney filed charges today," she said without preamble. "Fraud, child endangerment, and violation of adoption laws. Richard and Margaret Smith are going to face criminal prosecution." I set down my coffee cup and took a deep breath. After months of investigation, the legal system had finally caught up with them. The evidence Amy's firm had gathered, combined with testimony from other victims and the documentation I had provided, had built an overwhelming case. What does that mean for them? If convicted, they could face significant fines and potentially jail time. More importantly, it establishes a legal record of what they did. Other families they hurt can now pursue civil cases with criminal convictions as evidence. It was more than I had dared to hope for. Not just social consequences, but actual legal accountability for decades of manipulation and fraud. The criminal charges were just one piece of a larger transformation that had taken place over the past 6 months. The Smiths' entire world had collapsed in ways I never could have planned. Their house, which they had mortgaged beyond their means to maintain appearances, was now in foreclosure. Dad's consulting business had folded completely after the legal investigation scared away his remaining clients. Mom's antique shop had closed, unable to survive the combination of financial pressure and social boycott. Derek had been fired from his marketing job and was working at a call center while his wife filed for divorce. The video of him calling Maya names had followed him to every job interview, making it nearly impossible for him to find work in his field. But the most significant change was not about them at all. It was about the family Maya and I had built in their absence. Amy and Jessica had become the sisters I had always wished for. We talked almost daily, sharing stories about our mother Linda and planning visits so Maya could meet her aunts in person. They had welcomed us into their family with the kind of unconditional love I had never experienced before. "You know what Linda would have said about all this," Jessica told me during one of our calls. "She would have said that justice has its own timeline, and sometimes it takes decades for the truth to come out. But it always does eventually." Marcus had moved back to our city, not to reunite with me romantically, but to be closer to Maya during this transition. He had found a job with a local company and was building a life here so our daughter could have both her parents nearby. Maya deserves to have her family close, he had told me when he announced his decision. The family that actually loves her. Sarah and her kids had become our chosen family, the people we spent holidays and weekends with, who showed up when we needed support and celebrated our victories with genuine joy. Rebecca and her wife Lisa had taken on the role of Maya's honorary aunts, spoiling her with attention and teaching her that families come in all different shapes and that love is the only thing that really matters. Even our community had rallied around us. Maya's school teachers, who had witnessed years of the Smiths' subtle dismissiveness at school events, had become fierce advocates for her well-being. Our neighbors had shared their own observations about how she had been treated and offered support in dozens of small but meaningful ways. "You did something important," Mrs. Henderson told me one day as we chatted in the grocery store. "You showed a lot of people that it is okay to stand up to bullies, even when those bullies are family. Especially when those bullies are family." The most beautiful part of this transformation was watching Maya flourish. Without the constant undercurrent of rejection and criticism from the Smiths, she had blossomed into the confident, joyful child she was meant to be. She was excelling in school, making friends easily, and pursuing her interests without the weight of disapproval from people who had never truly accepted her. She talked openly about her feelings, asked questions about our family history, and expressed genuine excitement about getting to know her aunts and learn about her Chinese heritage. "I want to learn to cook Chinese food," she told me one evening. "Aunt Amy said she would teach me to make dumplings like Great-Grandma Linda used to make." "I think that sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Do you think Great-Grandma Linda would have liked me?" I pulled her into my arms and held her tight. "I think she would have loved you more than anything in the world. Just like the rest of us do." As for me, I had discovered something I had never known was possible. What it felt like to be authentically myself without constantly trying to earn approval from people who would never give it. I had started therapy to work through the trauma of learning my entire childhood had been built on lies, but I had also started embracing parts of myself that I had been trained to hide. I had stopped wearing the colored contacts and let my natural brown eyes show. I had started learning about Chinese culture and connecting with that part of my heritage. I had even started dating again, something I had avoided for years because I was afraid of bringing someone into our complicated family dynamic. Without the Smiths' judgment and criticism hanging over everything, I felt free to explore what I wanted in a partner and what kind of life I wanted to build. The person I was becoming felt like someone Linda Chen would have been proud to call her daughter. There were still hard days, moments when the grief of everything I had lost hit me like a wave. I grieved the mother I had never gotten to meet, the siblings I had been kept from knowing, the childhood that could have been different if the adults in my life had made better choices. But those moments of grief were balanced by overwhelming gratitude for everything I had gained. A daughter who felt loved and valued. Sisters who welcomed me with open hearts. A community that had rallied around us when we needed support. Most importantly, I had gained the knowledge that I was capable of protecting the people I loved, even when it meant going up against people who had controlled my entire life. The Smiths had spent 34 years teaching me that I was not good enough, that I did not really belong, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection they were willing to give me. They had tried to pass that same message on to Maya, and that was where they had finally pushed too far. In trying to make my daughter feel small, they had awakened something in me that they never could have anticipated, the fierce, protective love of a mother who would move mountains to keep her child safe. Now, as I watched Maya laugh with her cousins and plan adventures with her aunts and chat excitedly about her upcoming visit to meet her extended family, I knew that every difficult moment of the past 6 months had been worth it. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting the people you love? What would you do if you discovered your entire childhood was built on lies meant to keep you from knowing where you really belonged? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real family stories about standing up for what is right. Thank you for taking this journey with me, And remember that sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is showing them that they deserve to be loved exactly as they are. Here is to building the families we choose and never settling for anything less than unconditional love.